Hello class, welcome to our video lecture on the finishing touches, if you would, of Essay 3, your extended definition, and kind of using that to think about and look ahead to Essay 4. I've had quite a few conversations with people this week discussing Essay 3, and I think that they were very helpful. So if you have any questions about Essay 3, please feel free to call. Obviously, you can send me a message as well, but I think that talking about it on the phone is very helpful. As I've said in the other interviews, the question at issue is what do we learn about blank, your issue, identity, progress, courage, by analyzing blank, your fictional source or sources? So, for those of you, right, who are focusing on progress, we had a nice chat today. Normally, it's a good thing. But when you look at Hamlet making progress with his antic disposition of his plan in Acts 1, 2, and 3, 1, 3, 2, yes, he uses it logically, but as soon as he makes that progress and gathers his facts, well, it fuels his hubris. Therefore, his progress, although logical in the first half of the play, has a negative effect on his character, on society, on the culture in the second half of the play, just like courage. Right? Normally, courage is considered a good thing, progress considered a good thing. Could they actually be a negative thing if critical thinking skills are not used with the strategy? Just like depression, the opposite, normally a bad thing. Does it actually mean that you care? Right? Could depression be a good thing if people use critical thinking skills to work through it? Occam's razor, Rogerian strategy, philosophical counseling from page 60. Okay? So, whatever the term is that you chose, hopefully you're moving forward and analyzing that as your theme, if you would, your issue, as you're working through your fictional sources. So, just as in Essay 1, you made a point about joy, right? And marriage and relationships by analyzing the story of an hour. Just like in Essay 2, you picked a theme and made a point about your poem, right? Whether it was about love or revenge or justice. Right? For Essay 3 now, your theme is your issue, and hopefully you will use your fictional source, if you're just going to use one, to make a point about that abstract term. Because remember, an abstract term, not everyone agrees on the meaning. So think about Essay 3 in relation as you look ahead to Essay 4. Why? It might help you better understand it. The same thesis question remains for Essay 4. Now, think about Essay 4's topics: gender criticism, cultural criticism, queer criticism, historical criticism, Marxist criticism, reader response criticism, psychological criticism. So for Essay 4, your issue now becomes the word that comes before criticism, the adjective before criticism. Do you want to focus on gender? Do you want to focus on culture? Do you want to focus on, if you're doing Marxist, it's not Marxism. I guess you could say that, but you just focus on what? Power, socioeconomic roles, right? And the way that power and economics affect things. So at no point in Essay 4 do you need to say, I'm doing a Marxist criticism. I'm doing a psychological criticism. When you focus on psychology, you're doing a psychological criticism. When you focus on gender roles and identity, term from Essay 3, you're doing a gender criticism. When you focus on LGBTQIA issues, you're doing a queer criticism, right? When you focus on psychological issues, you're doing a psychological criticism. And I think this is where it's helpful to understand Essay 3 and Essay 4 from a similar perspective. Let's say you were writing on identity in Essay 3. Okay, identity, the character's actions, motivations, and development. So now the question is, what do they do, why do they do it, and how do they change? Well, if you're looking at their critical thinking strategies, kind of doing a psychological criticism, right? When you're looking at how their identity as a man or a woman, you're kind of doing a gender criticism. If you look at Lady Macbeth on sexing herself, or Horatio and Hamlet's homoeroticism, queer criticism. The cool thing is that cultural criticism fits for all of them. What is culture? It's everything. It's our beliefs, it's our attitudes, it's our behaviors, our traditions, our products, our laws, our languages, our institutions. So for Essay 4, refresh yourself with the 2 or 3 paragraphs, reading and writing about literature under each type of criticism. It tells you what you should focus on, just like the 2 or 3 paragraphs in reading and writing about literature under each of the elements of fiction, the elements of poetry, and the elements of plays tell you what to focus on. So hopefully for Essay 3, you're using pages 117 to 118 in reading and writing about literature, right? Using dialectical thinking as those bullet points on 118 suggest, making concessions, leading into refutations, using Rogerian strategy, using Occam's razor, avoiding hidden assumptions, making comparisons with analogies. Right? When you make contrasts, it's dialectical thinking. Looking at denotations, connotations, euphemisms. All of the strategies for Essay 3 apply for Essay 4. Only now for Essay 4, your issue is the type of criticism or criticisms you want to do. Remember, you don't just have to pick one. When you focus on the elements of fiction, it's formalism. So you're all doing formalism, just like you did for Essay 1, 2, 3, and now for 4. So the question is, what do you want to make the focal point? Just like you picked an issue from the list for Essay 3, you're going to pick an issue, a type of criticism, from the list for Essay 4, whether you want to focus on gender or culture or money and power, Marxism, or psychological ideas, psychological criticism, or the reader's responses, or culture. Got a lot of freedom. The last thing I want to say as I wrap this video up, psychological criticism directly relates to critical thinking. Think about it. As I was chatting earlier, I made a little note on my post-it here of what I spoke about with your fellow students as they were working on their papers. We talked about the ideas of psychological concepts, psychological disorders, psychological um, theories as present in the Shakespearean plays, yet they didn't even have these terms back then. Could you? Right? What do we learn about depression by analyzing Hamlet? Right? If that was your question at issue, could we look at how Hamlet deals with his depression to learn more about it? Absolutely. Does he use critical thinking skills in the beginning to work through it? Yep. Does he then let his depression fuel his hubris, if you would, in the second part of the play and abandon his critical thinking skills? I think so. So we could learn that depression could have a positive, in some ways, concession effect if people used critical thinking skills, philosophical counseling from page 60 to work through it, looking at their decisions. So again, none of these words were invented when Shakespeare wrote Hamlet and Macbeth. But could you say Hamlet's depressed? Yep. Could you say he's in denial? Yep. Could you say he suffers from multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia? Could you say he suffers from anxiety? Could you say that he's using the insanity defense at the end of the play, which is a psychological concept when he tells it wasn't me who did it, it was his madness? Same thing with Macbeth. Do we learn about paranoia? Do we learn about the negative effects of anxiety? Do we learn about how their insomnia, right, is fueled by their paranoia? Absolutely. I mean, in both of these plays, we learn what's going on in the characters' minds. And that's what a character analysis is. That's what psychological analysis is. When we look at their actions, motives, and development, it's an exercise in critical thinking. So, in some ways, psychological criticism could be a synonym for critical thinking analysis, or maybe vice versa. Just throwing it out there. So for those of you that are interested in psychological concepts and theories, that you can further those ideas in SA3 under the term, the issue, identity, or for SA4, if you want to continue along that analysis path, uh, you have that opportunity. Excuse me, I was holding back that sneeze this whole time. We're at 10 minutes and 25 seconds, so I want to wrap it up because I like to keep the video short and sweet so you can take a break, think about what you watched, maybe go back, watch it again. And again, feel free to call if you have any questions. More to come. I'll be posting the videos for the rest of this week's readings here shortly. Thank you for your attention.